What is up, Beer to Talk people? We are back with a long episode. I hope you loved the mini episodes, or you hated them and you were like, Adam, these are trash and I hate them. But I hope that you got a lot out of them and they were beneficial for you. Today is an exciting day because we are having the wonderful, magical, awesome Hawaiian citizen, Lindsey Roman, on our podcast. She's a destination and elopement wedding photographer all around the world, just killing it. And she's super sweet and tiny and amazing. And I don't mean tiny in like a bad way. Like she's just like, she's a bundle of joy, but an adult. Like she's not a baby. She'll laugh at this. So she's absolutely incredible. And her insights in this episode are just like, she holds nothing back. We talk about everything from Instagram marketing to switching your style and going into an adventure elopement kind of vibe, or like whatever you want to do. And it's just so good for people who are curious and have questions. And we just dive into it. I absolutely love it. So without any further ado, I want you to listen to this episode. Tell me what you get out of it. Shoot me an email. Here is Lindsey Roman. Here we go. Lindsey, what's up?
Hey, Adam, what's up?
How's it going? How's your day?
I am doing so well.
Look, you're already nervous because in the pre-show we were talking about this. So I've been starting to I want to get more conversational in these episodes. And so we've been the past few, I just asked a random question to start that wasn't in the emails we sent, just to I'm a sick person, just to mess with people.
I'm ready for it.
So here's my question. So we're just starting out for people that know you and I know you, and we already talked about Taylor Swift. Which Taylor Swift, and I had to do some Googling to figure this out. Which Taylor Swift boyfriend do you wish would have worked out for the long term?
That is such a good question. Oh, I was unprepared. Hold on. Okay. There's so many angles you could go with this. I would maybe say Taylor Lautner, way back in the day, what is even the word? Back to December. Yeah. I think they would have been so sweet together, but she had to break up with him, so it's fine. I'm not bitter at all, but I would maybe say Taylor Lautner because I think they are sweethearts and they would go well together.
Yeah. So in my Googling, I was like, who did she date? And I was like, I think she dated Justin Bieber. Well, that's not true at all.
No, that was Selena Gomez.
Yeah, it shows how much I know. And so I was Googling and I was looking and I was like, okay, which of these people? And most of them I didn't know who they were. I was like, what?
Right. Well, I think most of them were douches anyway. So yeah, maybe that's just me being on her side about it. I don't know.
Right. Exactly. That was the thing. I scrolled through and I looked through. I kind of read a little about them and which single was applied to them. And I was like, oh, John Mayer, that's what I wish would have worked out. That'd be beautiful. On an optimistic scale, I wish it worked out.
That's good. That's a good way to look at it.
But then I heard that, there's this Dear John song, which was right before I started listening to Taylor Swift. And I was like, what's the song? And I listened to it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so sad. This is terrible.
No. Heartbreaking. He broke her heart. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there seems to be a theme. There's this blog post I'm looking at, and it's the 12 relationships and their corresponding songs, which is hilarious. That's so awesome. Funny. So for the 6.5 people who don't know who you are,
oh my gosh, that's not even true.
Give me a little bit of background. Tell me the fun. Who is Lindsey? Where are you from? Where are you at? And what do you love doing? What's going on in your life?
Perfect. Okay. Well, for those that don't know me, my name is Lindsey Roman. I am a destination wedding photographer based in Hawaii, which is not a bad situation to be situated in. And I got started in photography. I was doing it as a hobby all throughout high school and college. I always was artistically inclined, but my main focus was always acting. I always wanted to go off to LA and be an actress. That was always end game for me. And so in college, I majored in theater and film because film acting was the thing that I wanted to do. And so after I graduated college, after that, I did an internship with my church just because I feel like when you graduate college, there's that moment of like, okay, what do I do with my life? So I did an internship with my church for a year. And it was in that year that, like I said, I had always done photography as a hobby. And I had a little dinky DSLR camera. I think it was a Canon T3i Rebel. And
everybody's first camera.
Exactly. And so I started playing around with it. And one day I just looked at it and I was like, why don't I know how to use that on manual? Like I've been shooting in auto. I took it to freaking Europe when I studied abroad, and all my European pictures were on auto in JPEG, and I just slapped myself now. But I looked at it and I was like, I want to actually learn how to use that. I don't even know what the word aperture means or what ISO means. Like, let's change that. So I literally pulled out the manual that day, like the camera manual that no one reads. And I was like, let's understand this thing. And so I like read through that, started like reading blogs, watching YouTube videos. I just like went full force into understanding, like, to get better at this hobby that I loved. It wasn't like with the intent of starting a business at all. That's just what the intention was just to get better. As I did that, this was before I was married. So I was living with like a bunch of girlfriends, and I like took them out and started taking photos of them. And then like I just started like going full force at it, but I was still working for my church at that time. And so then people in the church kind of started being like, oh, would you take our family pictures? So then I would do that. And like, I just started shooting anything and everything to just kind of get started. And it was so crazy how it worked out, but it felt like what I was made to do, like the passion that I already had, which was like, it was acting, but even in that, the reason I loved acting is because I was using my art and my creativity to tell a story and to make people feel something. And I feel like you're doing virtually the same thing with photography, or really any art form, that you're creating something to make people feel something.
Sure. It's like your expression, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so
I could see, sorry to interrupt, but I just had this vision in my mind because I watch your Instagram stories and I feel like I know your kind of personality. Like anybody says when they stop you randomly at Target and they're like, Lindsay, and you're like, who are you? But I can picture you like being at the church, and I used to work for a church as well. And awesome. They just see you like reading the camera manual, and you're like, what are you doing, Lindsay? And you're like, I traded in my Bible for the camera Bible. And you're just like, or I think too of like lots of photographers, especially just around, have like gotten gigs from church and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey guys, it wasn't written, but it's a 2,000-year-old plot just so the photographers could get gigs. Church. Yeah. Just kidding. It's a very deep cut, very obscure, but
it is.
But sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I just had this vision of just cute little Lindsay just sitting in like the church pew, just like reading her camera Bible.
That's me. No, but yeah, so I started shooting anything and everything, and I think it's like so funny because when people ask me like, how do I start a photography business? One of the best advice I could give you, which is probably not the one that people want to hear, I'm like, oh, well, go to church because people get married young there. And so then if all your friends are getting married, they're going to hire you, which is exactly what happened to me. I'm joking, obviously, like you can do whatever you want, but
Lindsay approved.
Yeah, but literally all my friends started getting married or getting engaged as I was like growing this thing. And so they were like, hey, would you take our engagement pictures? And I'm like, why, yes, I in fact would. And so then I started
doing the cheapest option. They were like, let's go. Yeah, exactly.
Although it was like a struggle because as I was starting to grow, like the person that came to me at the beginning got it for like $500 because that was like the very first wedding. Exactly. But then like as I started to grow, like it was like $2,000, and so I was like, whoops, well, I'm better now.
Exactly. Like the goal is to get I always tell people, I'm like, hey, start low, like do it as much as you can, build business, but like at the same time, like get out of there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, so I started doing their weddings then. And so that kind of gave me like portfolio work for weddings pretty quickly. And I realized that I absolutely loved weddings and couples. And even in that, I found out that I loved like a more passionate, candid, like real, raw, like more like, what's the word? I guess candid would be the word, style, like adventurous, like wild, whimsical kind of thing. And I knew the direction that I wanted to head in. Like as I was growing this thing, I was like, okay, like it slowly like became a business. And I realized, okay, I want to become a destination wedding photographer, like elopements, intimate weddings, all that. Like I loved everything about that. But I lived in Kansas at the time. And so like I grew up in Kansas, from Kansas, born and bred. I'm actually in Kansas right now, back home visiting family and friends. So it's kind of bittersweet, awesome to be back. But I was like, okay, I live in Kansas and I want to become a destination wedding photographer. But the biggest destination here is like a cornfield or a wheat field. And so I was like, okay, this is a struggle. So my husband and we got married right when I went full time with photography, which maybe isn't the best decision ever to be done, because like he was still in school and I went full time. And then like he's still in school and I'm full time, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this photography thing. Good luck on finances, student. But we made it. God is faithful. He is awesome. But we love to travel. And so even in that first like year of marriage, we traveled a ton. And so I would strategically, anytime we travel, I would like take my camera and do couple calls in like, I guess, more adventurous, quote unquote, like locations. And so I wanted to shoot in the mountains. I wanted to shoot in the desert. I wanted to shoot like anywhere that was just like beautiful and unreal. And so that's how I slowly started to build a more adventurous portfolio while I was still in Kansas. And then my husband graduated college and he joined the Coast Guard, which was fun. And so he went to boot camp. And then immediately from boot camp went to A school, which is just like more specific training. And then from A school, he got a bunch of billets to have our first official like military move. And lo and behold, we get Hawaii of all places.
Sick.
And so a lot of people ask like, oh, how did you like decide to move to Hawaii? Like, oh, tell me about like, how you afforded it? And I was like, I'm like, I don't have a good answer for you because the military moved us. It's completely like, but a lot of people probably don't know that. So that's important information. But
that's like the timing of, I'm not sure exactly when the timing, but it was probably in the season, I'm guessing, where you could just be like, thanks, Obama. Like, that's just like the timing.
Yeah. But, well, actually, no, this was last July. So I have only been in Hawaii about like less than a year, which is a little bit crazy. But so we moved to Hawaii and then it blew up, just like I was already headed more towards this adventurous, wild, intimate wedding type of work. And then when you pair that with Hawaii, it pairs very well together. Hawaii is like a destination wedding area of itself. And so, yeah, we moved there and then it just started blowing up, and that's where I am now. I'm traveling all over. Honestly, I'm not just staying in Hawaii. My travel schedule this year is crazy. People joke that it looks like a band on tour, which it kind of does. But it's been such a blessing, and it's really awesome to get to tell love stories in the way that I do. And I am so blessed. So that's a little bit of my story.
I love that. So before we kind of get into like the fun Hawaii stuff, like give me the nitty gritty of traveling and finding couple calls. Cause I know that's not super easy for a lot of people.
Yes.
Or you'll like, you kind of pick it based on like, you don't want to say like beggars can't be choosers kind of deal, but if there's a baller mountain and you're just like, guys, I need a couple, and you need to be here and let's do this. Like, what was a little bit of your process? So like, for some of them, did you say, hey, I'll do it like for any cost, essentially just tag me? And then it's other ones like maybe were more popular, easy to find somebody who actually wanted.
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. So the very first time I ever did this, so I was from Kansas and we loved to travel, but my husband was still in school, like I said. So we did weekend trips as much as we could. So we went for my birthday for a weekend trip to the Great Sand Dunes in Colorado, which was only about like a 8-hour drive, which is kind of still a lot, but it's fine. And so we drove to Colorado and I was like, the Great Sand Dunes in Colorado is epic. Like, I want to shoot a couple there. That's great. And literally the things that I did was I like put it on my personal Facebook. I put it on Instagram, obviously. I put it on like Facebook photography groups. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways. And basically I just say, hey, couple call, looking for a couple. And back then I think I said, no, I didn't say free. I think I just left it open-ended at the beginning because I didn't want to limit. I didn't want to say like, oh, free couple session, like, and then you be stuck with a free session. I wanted to be like, oh, couple call, and then see if like they're willing to pay me and then go from there. Cause I didn't want to like bite off my profit before I even like had the opportunity. Cause if someone would pay me full price, then like by all means, but then if they didn't, then I could be like, okay, free.
The way you said it was amazing. Okay, free.
Yeah. So I reached out, and I think for that specific session, one of my friends tagged one of her, like a mutual friend tagged the couple in my post on Instagram. So that one, like the very first one that I got was from Instagram. And they lived in Denver. And so then they drove down with their dog and we played in the sand dunes. And that was actually such a sweet opportunity because we hit it off with that couple. And then about a few months later, when my husband was actually in boot camp, since we hit it off so much and we became friends, they invited me to Denver just to like chill for a week because my husband was in boot camp. So I did that. And Luke, the guy, reached out a few weeks before because they were boyfriend and girlfriend. So he reached out and he's like, hey, can I propose to Caitlin while you're here so you can photograph it? And I was like, can you? Yes, of course. And so we kind of schemed together he wanted to propose in the snow. So then he proposed on so we chose together a glacier in Colorado. And so we woke up at sunrise. Caitlin thought it was just like a styled shoot. I was like, hey, will you guys model for me? I really want snow in my portfolio, but I live in Kansas. Like there's not a lack of snow there. So we went up and he proposed, and that was like in and of itself another epic session because it was like, I put her in a red dress because I was staying at their house. So I was like going through her closet and she showed me this like long, we were looking at maxi dresses, but most of her maxi dresses were like flowers. And I was just like, okay, that's not quite good in the snow if it's like a floral, like summery maxi dress. And then she brings out this like crimson red, long, like it's like a long flowy maxi dress. And I was like, what? Why didn't you show me that to begin with? Like, that's obviously what we're going to wear. And she was like, oh, it's my old prom dress. And I'm like, what? That's still in style? That's so impressive. But
that's amazing. That's awesome.
Basically, yeah, that was like another like adventurous shoot obviously with the same couple. But it's really sweet because last week I just photographed their wedding in Denver. And so it was like kind of full circle to follow them all throughout. And it was literally just from a couple call. So you never know what can happen if you just like put it out into the universe.
That is amazing. Like I have a story that kind of relates to that. Last year we did like a engagement session giveaway, which is the first time I ever did that, but I wanted to try it and just kind of see. And I just told people to tell like how they propose, like their engagement story. And then we did like a random choosing. And so I picked this couple, they were local. We shot their engagement and I didn't think anything of it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to give them free engagement photos and it is what it is. But just through hanging out, they got to know me a little bit more and they were like, hey, will you shoot our wedding? And I was like, yes. And like I think a lot of times people like don't even think about that. And it's like, guys, there's still beauty in the opportunity. Like it's very easy for us to be like, downplay that. And even like, we talk about like the pick your brain question that people get all the time and all kinds of stuff like that. But there are just some times when you never know. And like,
absolutely.
I still, to this day, like every once in a while I'll be like, hey, let's go shoot for free. Let's go do this thing. And people are like, really? I'm like, yeah, let's go do that. Because it's like I want to, try and create something for ourselves too. But then also like you're kind of, you've gotten a few extra quarters at the casino and you're like, all right, let's go play some slots. Like, let's go, Lindsay, or whatever the case is. That's a terrible analogy.
Well, in that first session, I think that I did with them on the sand dunes, like I think I didn't tell them a price, and I think I don't know what they assumed it was free or not, but like we did the shoot and then they were like, how much? And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, I think I charged them $100, like that first one. And they were like so happy to pay it. They were like, yeah, of course. We had so much fun. But like, I think it's when you're doing couple calls, like reach out anywhere and everywhere, put it on your story, put it on your Instagram, put it literally everywhere out in the universe. And don't say it's free right at first, just to like not limit yourself. But if you're not getting anything, then by all means, like say free session. But I think with couple calls, like it's less about like the client and more about like, it's almost like a styled shoot in a sense, because you're having a specific place that you're wanting to shoot. Yeah. And you can do it for free if you want, because it's adding to your portfolio if it's free. And so that's what I did a ton when we traveled. And then by the time we moved to Hawaii, and now I don't have to do it for free. I can just put a couple call out, or I can just put my travel schedule out, and then people will book me based on my travel schedule. But that took a while to build to that.
Sure, totally. And I mean, it's like there's a difference between you and the, like, no offense to folks who have this, but the have passport will travel in their Instagram bio. Like, there's a big difference for people who want to travel, and you're like, what you were doing is you were traveling anyway, on the freebie side of things, or the, hey hubs, I'm going to go out for 3-4 hours and I'll see you later. And do this thing.
It's so funny because people are always like, how do you become a destination wedding photographer? Like, how do you travel to all these places? And I'm like, become a photographer and then travel. The biggest thing that I think is the disconnect is that people who live like in Kansas, say like me, or in Texas or somewhere like that isn't necessarily like a destination to travel to. They're like, well, how do I get somebody in like Washington or California in the mountains to book me? And it's like, well, they're not going to unless you go there and like shoot there, because that's not going to be their first inclination to like find a random Texas or Kansas photographer for their elopement in California. But if you go someplace and either shoot it for free or shoot it for cheap, or just book a normal session there or something, then you have that portfolio work, and you can have that like that work on your website, and you can call yourself like a destination because you literally are like traveling around. So
right, totally. Before we kind of dive in, because I know people are going to ask like, how do you transition or whatever, but like, what's your kind of workflow? So let's say you have the gig, so we'll just say like a random place, because it'll be fun to kind of work this out. So like Yosemite National Park in California looks dope. It's been the background of all of our Apple computers for the last few years. But it's like very cool. There's lots of good views there. Like, you have a shoot there. It's incredible. What are your next few steps into, and let's say you want to shoot there again. Like, what are your next steps? Like, you blog it. What's your mindset behind even just like the title? Like, do you go simple and you're like Yosemite elopement, or do something else?
In a place like that where like people, like the word itself is a destination, like Yosemite, people know what that is, and people want to shoot there. People want to get married there. Like, that's a huge destination. So I immediately after that shoot, well, strategically during the shoot or the elopement or whatever it would be, I would story it like behind the scenes, like to show people that I'm there, then that I'm shooting, and that I do shoot there. So anywhere that I'm like, if I'm in an epic place like that, I'll strategically story behind the scenes, because people love behind the scenes. So that'd be like the first thing to do, like while I'm there. And then immediately afterward, I love sharing sneak peeks, mainly like for the client, because the client is like excited to see sneak peeks right away. So I'll go home, you're backing up your photos anyway. So I just like edit a few. And then I'll like text them to the client or email to the client. And then I will put them up on my story. Like if I love the session and if it went really well, and it looks like something that I want to continue shooting, especially if it was in Yosemite, then like I would probably obviously want to keep shooting that. And so then I would put it on my story, and I would geotag Yosemite, because then that can like pop up, or even hashtag Yosemite. And you can like make this text really small in the corner so it doesn't distract from it. But that's still like popping up on people like that are hashtagging and geotagging and looking at Yosemite, like the location on Instagram. So I would like exploit that for as much as I can, like the fact that I have work in that location, and put it everywhere. So story is one. Then I would probably make a post on Instagram and geotag it, and like do all the hashtags for like hashtag Yosemite wedding, hashtag Yosemite bride, hashtag the California bride. Like there's so many different local specific hashtags with Yosemite or California that you could do that could easily fill up 30 hashtags. So I do that, and then we haven't even gotten to blogging yet.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best part about jamming out about this.
And so then I would blog it, and I would name, so SEO is pretty important. And so I would name all my photos something like Yosemite Adventurous Elopement Photographer, or something like that, where think of like what brides that want to elope in Yosemite would be Googling, and like name your photos that. And then for like the title, I would say something like the couple's name. And then I would say like, depending on if it was like an elopement or a wedding, we'll say it's an elopement because that's fun. Like I would say like elopement, or Yosemite elopement, or Yosemite intimate elopement adventurous destination wedding photographer, or something that's like my blog titles are pretty long, mainly because it's less about like having a pretty nice, like neat title and more about SEO. Like I want to put buzzwords in there that people are Googling so they'll find it.
Totally.
And then something else I would do is blast those photos all over Pinterest, because Pinterest is a huge place for wedding like inspiration. And so especially for eloping and things like that, I would want to make sure that they were on there.
Totally. That's awesome. That like 4 minutes for people who want to know, be like, that's how it happens.
There's a lot of different ways that you can spread it out there.
Yeah, totally. And I think too, it's like you know, in addition to the shoot, it's like even for me, we'll talk about this, but like fronting the story and being behind the scenes, and like I'm so prone to quote unquote be professional and not share when I'm shooting somewhere. And it's like, no, like don't do that. Like let's talk about where we're at, and especially
I'm like the opposite. I feel like I'm like, hey, let's like throw confetti in the air and photograph it. No, I'm kidding. But like I'm just like always like there's a fine line of like you don't want to like have your phone out the entire time, and like you want to like give them an amazing experience. Sure. But usually if I pull my phone out and as I'm like, hey, could I take a boomerang of you guys, or could I do a quick story video? And they're always usually like, oh my gosh, yes.
Right, especially if they find you via Instagram, then it's kind of like completes the circle. You know, like they understand the culture. Quick question for Instagram for people wondering, because you are like, one, it just brings me joy to watch your story, and then two, like I don't think I follow anybody else who is just as open or fun or what seems like themselves. And I know that's hard. Like I'm sure like even hearing that, you're like, I'm only giving you 90% of the pie or 60% of who Lindsey is. But like, was there ever, you know, when stories first came out, or Snapchat, whichever you were kind of hanging out on first, like, were you always that way? Or have there been certain things where one day you woke up and you're like, you know what, my hair's not done, but screw it. Like, I want to talk about this. Like, yeah. Was there a moment for you?
So I think, well, before stories came out, I think stories are freaking incredible, because before stories came out, Snapchat was like the outlet. And I used Snapchat only with like personal friends. Like I didn't use Snapchat like widely. And so I would look at Instagram, and especially right when I first started becoming a photographer and using Instagram as like a marketing tool and just a place to connect to other people, I looked at all the photographers out there, and they seemed like the super hipster, cool, like chill, like leather, like jackets and like coffee cups with like black espresso. I don't like, it was just like all I saw was like granola hipsters out there. And there's an element of me that's like that, but then I'm like a basket case, and I'm super energetic and I'm super outgoing, and that didn't fit that vibe. And so I think I tried to like make myself seem a little more moodier, like personality wise, than I actually was, just to like try to fit in to like the Instagram like world, which is like not good. You shouldn't have to try to mold into try to be everyone else when you're born to stand out and you have a unique personality in and of yourself. And so when stories came out, first of all, I laughed because I was like, wow, they are stealing that from Snapchat. But that's fine.
It was so bad.
It's so bad. But now I feel like everyone's on stories and not Snapchat. Well, Snapchat's still awesome. But
on Snapchat, they're just sharing like camera manual photos. They're just like, hey, check out my camera manual.
Yep, exactly. And so right when stories came out, I was like, oh, that's a cool way to show people behind the scenes of what you're doing. But then there was like that kind of like culture of like, wait, do we curate our story as well as our feed? Like, what do we do? Is like Snapchat like a crazy psycho story, and like Instagram stories a more curated thing? And then I realized, I don't know, I think it hit me that like people want to feel connected. People want to be heard and know, like they feel like they're known and related to. And something that I just stopped like pretending to be, and I wasn't really pretending, but I think I was just like watering down my personality for the masses. Whereas like people, like I think I did something once that was like a little more like funny, because I have a theater background. I love entertaining. I love making people laugh. And so that's just like a natural outpour of my personality. And I think I did something one time that was like a little more exuberant or like extroverted or crazy, and people loved it. And I was like, okay, people love the real me. Like that's the real me. That's Lindsey. And then I was like, people want to feel like they're not alone. And so like, if you show up with no makeup on, like bedhead, and like, if you show up and you are authentically you, people love that and people feel like they know you. And ironically, that's even more of a marketing tool. Like I do it because it's authentically me, but funnily enough, it like makes people feel more connected to me, which makes people hire me because they want to be my best friend, or they feel like they're my best friend. Therefore, like they want their best friend to photograph them. And so it makes people feel connected to you in a real way. And then I love to dance. I love, like, again, theater background. I was in High School Musical 2, no shame. Not the movie. That sounded way cooler when I realized that's a lie. I was not in the movie. I was in the theater show, but basically I love to dance. I love like all that. And so I started like doing dancing videos, and I would just like sing to the camera, or I would dance to the camera. And then people loved it because I think they're excited to see somebody else like owning who they are and knowing who they are and like not being ashamed about that. I think that's endearing. But that was literally just me being authentically me, and people love it and I love it. And I think it makes Instagram more of like a homey place. Like it doesn't feel like, sure, the feeds are curated, like I'm doing that strategically and it's pretty, but there's a place I think on stories that you can be real and you can be raw and you can share like the real moments of your life.
It's like Instagram is like this curated, beautiful art gallery, and it's very hip, and there are succulents on marble, and there are like all kinds of stuff, and there's even beautiful like, you know, adventurous photos in this art gallery, and you're over in the corner just partying it up, like you brought a boombox and you're like, let's go. And I think there's something about like, and I try to do this for my couples, but it's one of those things, and I think a lot of us struggle with it, including myself. That's why I'm like, I love diving into this with you, is like people need permission to be themselves.
Yes.
And I want my couples to be themselves, but oftentimes like it has to start with me being myself, you know, whether it's good.
That's
good
so
or bad.
true though.
And it's like,
like that goes to like, even on like, people always ask me how I get my couples to be so vulnerable or so like silly or so open and like wild and crazy, like for the camera to get like candid shots. And I'll be like, well, it starts with you. Like if you show up with an awkward attitude, with an awkward being like, okay, well, can you go stand over there and like, put your hand on his like head or whatever. Like, like if you're awkward and if you bring that awkward, like awkward, quiet energy to the shoot, that's what they're going to feel. But if you're coming to it like wild and crazy and like, hey, okay, we're going to have so much fun. And if you're acting out the directions and the prompts that you want them to do, but like you're acting it out like even more crazy, then they're going to be like, okay, there's no way we're going to look as stupid as she just did. So we can like be like free.
Totally. No, I mean, it's like you're totally right. And there's a place like there probably are photographers that want to do like the quiet stand here, like fine art kind of vibe or whatever.
Exactly. And there's no problem with that.
Right. Exactly. And they're just like hip and leather jackets and cold brew, and they have their thing.
That's so awesome.
And then there's Lindsay Roman just freaking going crazy. And I love it. I think I read in like one of your blog posts that you, like some random question you'll pull up with the couples is like, when was the first time you passed gas in front of them or that you farted in front of them?
Yep.
I was like, that's amazing. Yeah. Because there's just
I'll get them like really close and intimate and be like, okay, now like, I want you guys to kiss. Perfect. Okay, now like describe each other's farts. Like
That's amazing. One of my lines is not, this is like very inappropriate compared to that. I'll just be like, hey, think of the other person naked. And the reaction or their face is like, you'd think it'd be like happy or like, yeah, but it seldom is it. It's usually like this awkward moment and then it bursts into laughter. Like, okay.
That's so good. I'm going to steal that. That's good.
Yeah. I just like, it's hilarious. And it's funny on wedding day because, you know, if we've done an engagement session, we've already kind of talked through those situations and I've used those lines. And they're really, a lot of them are called icebreakers for a reason, and they're not trivial. We were trying to get out of the BS and trying to like get to know these people and vice versa.
Right.
Like, and the better we know them, the better the photos are and the more authentic they are. And like come wedding day though, most of the family or like the bridal party, they kind of have an idea of me, but you know, I'll say like, hey, think of the other person naked. Or if they have the dog, I'll say, think of the dog naked. And this is such a weird podcast already, Lindsay.
It's great.
You just see bridesmaids' reactions at first. They're like, what? And then they're like, they find that the couple's cool with it or whatever.
Right.
Or Like, I've said the most awkward things ever to my couple that come wedding day, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, mom was watching that one. Okay. All right. But like,
you're like, ooh, whoops.
So tell me a little bit more, like, now you're in Hawaii, like, things are going well for you. I think I read the other day, or you told me that you're booked like till September, October, at least at the time of this recording. Like, what made you want to do the adventurous, like, elopement, intimate vibe? Like, what made you want to dive into that?
So yeah, that's a really good question. As I was slowly starting to like get it more into couples and weddings in general, maybe it was in Kansas, or like maybe when you're starting out, you usually get like the dingy church basement weddings because you're cheap and like you're starting out to like more low budget weddings. And I absolutely hated those. I wanted to feel like connected to my couples in a more real way. And so I've always loved nature. I've always loved the outdoors. Me and my husband love to go hike in national parks. And there was something to me about nature and like the epicness of the world that God created that is so similar to, I think, the epicness of love and like the feeling of magic between two people that are in love. I think that's so relatable to the feeling of magic and freedom when you're on the top of a mountain looking at a grand landscape. I think those two pair hand in hand. And so that to me felt more real and more raw than like taking a photo of a couple in a studio. And that's just how I personally look at it. And it attracted me so much to more outdoor type of weddings. And I think more often than not, the outdoor type of weddings are usually the elopements in the mountains or intimate weddings with like on the beach with a small like family. But yeah, that's what really attracted me was just like the pairing of like the epicness of love with the epicness of the world. It's such, both of those are so beautiful. And I think they go hand in hand and kind of remind us of one another.
Right. I feel like the few destinations I've done, which, probably a handful. And now after this conversation, I'm like, we should hack this a little bit. We should repost these. But I shot a wedding, ironically, in Maui.
That's fun.
Out there a while back. And it was the smallest wedding I had ever shot, 14 people. And the difference between that and other weddings I had shot at the time, like, I feel like you talk to any kind of photographers, if they don't know you, they're like, yeah, we got to get to, I got the mom crying and it was so great, or I got these tears, or, we still kind of talk about moments as if they're like Game Boys or, Pokemon to collect. And we're just like,
anytime someone starts crying on a wedding day, I'm like zoomed in with my camera. I'm like, I'm getting
just the machine gun sound comes out and you're like, what is happening?
Literally.
Yeah. But this, you have these big weddings and there would usually be one or two people tearing up. And sometimes it doesn't feel intimate at all. And the difference was this wedding, every single person cried, like all 14. And then including myself, we're just tearing up. We're like, this is so beautiful. And, it was like, and I still try to do this with my couples now. And I tell them, even for my wedding, I'm just like, make the day yours. Like, even if it is a big wedding or even if it's somewhere else, like, look at the list of things you feel like you're supposed to have, quote unquote, and cut that in half. Like, do whatever doesn't feel like you, or like take away the things that don't feel like you. And, this wedding, I think they had every family member tell the couple like what's something they've learned about for like love, or like what it's like advice kind of thing. And that's why everybody started tearing up. And they're just like, I just hope for everything for you. And there was something about like, and these are the weddings I'm trying to get into even more. It's like, there's something about the sacredness of like what's happening, religious or not, where you're just like, no, like my job is to tell this story. Like this is something happening. And I want these photos to like get as close to feeling, this out as possible. And I think like, I don't know. It's very unique. People can't explain it. And I'm like,
that's so true, because I think for elopements or intimate weddings, like you said, like you're scaling back all the crap that you don't necessarily need, which there's not anything wrong with like a DJ and a party. Like those are amazing weddings and I love shooting them. But there is something, like you said, so special about scaling all of it back, only focusing your money and your investment and your time on making the day truly about your love and your relationship. And you don't need all the fluff if that's like the focus. And then just like having those intimate family members and friends around just to like celebrate. Like I think it scales it back and it really truly puts it back on like you said, the sacredness of what's happening. And it's absolutely beautiful. Like elopements, I cry all the time.
I just kind of thought of you like with the DJ and everything, and I'm like, I need to have Lindsay and I shoot a wedding together, and we'll just dance the entire day.
Oh my gosh. Yes, we would. Yeah, I would love that.
It's so fun. I feel like too, it's like, at least for me, like come reception time, you know, we get through formalities if we have a few of those, and then dance floor kind of starts up, and you know, through the end of the night, it gets a little bit more crazy. And you know, you start to show even more of your personality because other people they feel safe now, like they're ready to go. And I feel like people get hype when the photographer starts dancing, like, oh, what's happening? And I'm not a dancer at all.
People are always shocked because they're like, wow, she's so small and she's like down, and like I go hard, like, but I sometimes wonder if I go hard, if people will think, oh, well, she's not doing her job, or like she's not taking photos, like. But I literally will break it down for a bit and then like snap, break it down, snap. And like, and I go past the thought of like, if they think I'm not professional, because I know when I show them the photos, they'll be epic and they'll be like, oh, those are great.
Totally. Or like shooting while you're dancing and you get the reaction and you like show them, you're like, listen, I got this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and you kind of, in order to get like really hype dance party shots, you kind of got to get in there, like in the middle.
Yeah.
And so I literally, because kind of in general, people kind of dance in a circle and there's like the middle of the circle. I will straight up wiggle myself in there and like shoot in a circle, like around from everyone, because you get the best shots that way.
I feel like we would be like some kind of superhero team where I'm like a 300-pound bearded man. I'd be like, all right, I can only get so far into the circle without people noticing me. I'd be like, Lindsay, it's your time to ride. Let's go.
Yep. I'm a little ninja. Just go in there.
Exactly. That's amazing. I love that. So tell me give me like the Lindsay Roman prescription for, let's say, not starting out. So people like myself or folks who I enjoy what I do. We shoot 35 weddings a year. Like, but if that person wants to switch to destination and elopements, in addition to what we kind of talked about already, like, do you have other advice? I've heard other people, they'll say, hey, you should take off anything on your blog that isn't what you want to shoot. Like, who cares about the SEO? Like, rip apart and deconstruct, you know, the things that your client is seeing. Like, what would be your take if you had to be like the Lindsay Roman consultant at that moment?
I would definitely agree with that. When I was first starting, I was shooting everything, and even just going into couples in general, I had a problem of like, I was shooting families in my church and they kept booking me for family sessions. And so I was like, well, this is a problem because I don't want to do family sessions anymore. But I kept showing them. I kept putting them up on my Instagram, and like, people are going to book you for what you're showing. So absolutely, if you want to narrow your niche to like just couples or weddings, but even more so to adventurous destination elopements, narrow your niche and like don't show on your website or your Instagram like big, huge, grand church weddings if that's not what you want to do. In addition, like, people aren't going to know to book you for an elopement unless you call yourself one, like an elopement photographer. Because I think from a bride's perspective, if you're eloping for some reason, I don't think they're going to look for like a wedding photographer. They're probably going to type into Google like California elopement photographer. Maybe that's just like the mindset. You always have to think of the mindset of the bride, and so, or the person that you're basically wanting to attract. And so I would put on your website like that you are a destination intimate wedding and elopement photographer, or just say like elopement photographer if that's truly what you fully want to go into. But yeah, call yourself that. And I think there's a thing out there that like people are afraid to like own themselves, because they feel like they're not that yet. And so I would say kick that fear to the curb, say goodbye, and own yourself. And there's a little air of like faking it till you make it a little bit. Like when I moved to Hawaii, we found out 2 months before we moved to Hawaii that we were going to be there, and we lived in Kansas still. But literally that day, I changed my website. I changed my Instagram. I changed literally everything about my business online to say Hawaii destination wedding photographer. And for a while, it kind of seemed a little like duplicitous. Is that a word? Because it was like wheat fields and like Kansas photography. But then like there was not a palm tree in sight. It was like destination Hawaii wedding photographer. But that's okay because I did that and I called myself that even before I technically was that. And I booked 2 engagement shoots on the island before I even got there because I owned that and I said, hey, that's what I am. Maybe that's not technically what I am at this moment in time, but that's where I'm going. So I'm going to call myself that.
Totally.
And so it's like, you can't be afraid to own yourself and to say, hey, this is what I want to do. So if you want to do elopements, call yourself an elopement destination wedding photographer. And then, show only that on your website. The other thing I would say is like in your branding, typically, I mean, and don't obviously change your entire brand. Be who you authentically are. But if you want to shoot more like outdoorsy, like mountain wild type of stuff, then do everything that you can to attract the kind of bride and groom that want to like elope in the mountains. They're probably the kind that love coffee and love like chacos and love like parachuting, and like they're probably more of like an outdoorsy type of person if they want to elope and get married in nature. Right. Usually that correlates. And so like do things that like speak directly to that person and that repel, like, cause you're wanting to attract and repel. And so if you don't want to shoot like grand ballroom weddings, then everything about your website repel the bride that wants like a princess ball gown. But if you want that and you don't want, like, it's basically all about attracting and repelling. So attract the bride that you want and repel the bride that you don't want.
Totally. I think for those who don't know, when you just call yourself that early on in the Christian world, we call that name it and claim it. I'm just kidding.
Yes. So true. So true.
But that's like, it's one of those things too. And I think like, people still, we talked about permission to feel themselves but you're not saying like, just fake it and lie. You're like, you had the intentions of doing that. And then also like you left whatever work resembled that and you had the ability to do that. And so like, you kind of had this circle around that, like that support, but that makes sense too. Like, so question for you now is what did that feel like when you just deconstructed everything on your site? Like, did you delete old Instagram posts and stuff too?
I did not. No, I'm not a fan of deleting old stuff because I like to see, I like to see other people's growth of like where they started to where they are now. And so I was like, nah, like if you scroll back on my feed, it was a straight up personal Instagram. I worked at Disney and it was like all Mickey Mouse for a while there. So like, I just love to see the growth of that. And then even when I called myself a Hawaii destination wedding photographer before I was technically on the island, I didn't delete anything else. I think I deleted old like family stuff. I deleted stuff that obviously wasn't what like photos of couples. I think I might have deleted a few sessions that weren't in the vibe of what I wanted to go toward. But I wasn't nervous about like SEO or anything because I was adding I literally that day that we found out we were moving to Hawaii, I SEO'd my entire site with like Hawaii destination wedding, Maui bride, like Hawaii elopement, like all the things. And I just trusted and had faith that like I would book once I got to the island or before, like just by doing that and calling myself that.
That's awesome. That's super cool. Man, this is like drinking from a fire hose now. That's awesome. So what does your week look like now, especially with shoots? Like, do you have a limit? Like, hey, I'm only doing 4 shoots a week, or like, what does your week look like for Lindsey?
Oh gosh, every week is different. Like this week I'm in Kansas. Next week I'm in Michigan. And then the month after that I'm going to Europe. So every week is different and it completely depends on the season. But I got into I started getting so overwhelmed and so overbooked with myself because I started saying yes. Like it's a good problem to have. I'm not sitting here complaining like, oh, I have too much work on my hands. But I guess what I was doing was working so well that I was booking like crazy, like from probably this past December up till now June. And then I'm fully booked for 2018 right now. But I started booking everything because if I physically was not doing a session on that date, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm free. And so I started booking like that, but then that was stupid because I realized that I wasn't paying attention to like the logistics of like how I would actually feel doing that. Like I booked back in April, I booked I booked a session in Maui. So I'm based on Oahu. And so every time you do a session on another island, you have to fly. Granted, it's only like a 30-minute flight, but you still have to fly and like go through security and all that. So I booked a session in Maui on one day. The next day I flew to Texas for like a few shoots and a wedding for that weekend. And then I flew back. And the day after I flew back, I also flew to Maui that next day for another session. And then I came back to Oahu that same day. And then like 2 days later, I flew to LA. And like I did that in April, and I in the middle of doing all that, I was like, that was stupid. Like why did I book myself that much? And so I feel like it's less about how many shoots I'm doing. It's more about like paying attention to the traveling and like jet lag and how I'm physically going to feel when I'm doing all of that, and like being mindful of like not biting off more than I can chew. But I feel like I don't think I have more than 4 weddings a month. No, not 4, but in that it's probably 4, but it's like, I need to look at my calendar, honestly. But some of those weddings are elopements. And so I don't count those as like as intense.
Sure.
They usually aren't. They're usually less. They're like 4 hours or less or something like that. And it's more chill than a full on wedding. But I think I have like in general 4 either elopements or weddings a month, and then a couple sessions sprinkled throughout as much as I can handle. But also, you have to edit, you have to have a life. So you're traveling too. So it's a balance.
Yeah. That's what I was curious about. It's like, you're depending on how much you shoot, like when are you editing, or when are you finding time to like spend time with your husband? Like what's his schedule like, Right.
Well, Loki just outsourced my editing to my husband. Actually, I taught him to edit for me. And so he's now my editor, which is amazing. He does a great job.
That's awesome.
I did that because I realized that with my travel schedule, I have a 30-day turnaround for both weddings and sessions, which is a little shorter than most people, I think, or quicker than most people. But I realized that I had that turnaround time, and I was traveling so much that like in order to make those deadlines, I would have to have been editing like in my sleep. Like I would have had to not sleep, not eat, like edit all the time. And so I outsourced that to him, and my life is better now.
That is awesome. Well, congratulations to Lindsey's husband on your job upgrade. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, awesome. Coast Guard / photo editor.
That's right. That's awesome. That's super cool, man. So tell me a little bit more. So like, are you still, I think a lot of people kind of, as we're wrapping up, like people see your stuff or other adventure, elopement, say badass photographers, and they see it all. And based on this podcast, and I love what we're kind of doing, like demystifying it. We had do you know Benj Heish by any chance?
Yes, I love him. He's the best.
We had him on. It was the longest episode so far, and we just talked about like relationships for the entire time. It was amazing.
I love it.
But something that people see when they see an Instagram profile that has a K at the end of the following, or all these gorgeous mountains and all this stuff, is and it is this way for many people, but like even for Benj, something we talked about, he was like, I still have weddings that I shoot in a church sometimes. I just don't post them. Are you still getting that, or are you lucky and blessed to be able to like diving in?
Absolutely. So like I said, I'm very strategic about what I post and what I don't post, and everything that I do post is geared toward like the bride that wants to elope in the mountains. Like that's what I love doing, and that's who I want to book over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But I do absolutely, same as Benj, I book like a few. It's rare now that I am in Hawaii, because most Hawaii weddings are not indoors, like they're outside on the beach,
right,
which is nice. But I just actually did a wedding back in Kansas like 3 weeks ago. The ceremony was in a church. But like absolutely beautiful wedding, but the church was a little bit dingy and dark. And so I'm not going to post those photos. Like I'll still post like sneak peeks and stuff from that wedding that were outdoors, and like this reception was beautiful. It was so pretty. But because I don't want to book like a dingy church wedding again, I'm not going to post those.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was in Texas in April. I shot a wedding in Odessa, Texas. It was in like a barn. The groomsmen wore jeans and cowboy boots, and like the couple, yeah, right. The couple was so sweet. I love them. They're the best, but I don't want to do that again personally. I found myself standing there, and I was like, I've shot Hawaii destination weddings. Like how am I in Odessa, Texas right now? Like you just have moments like that. But like I love like serving my couples, but at the same time, my Instagram is for me and my marketing purposes. And so you can't like sit there and be like, oh, well, that couple didn't get a post on Instagram, because that's not for them. Like their photos are for them. Give them sneak peeks, but don't feel like you have to owe every single client a post on Instagram, because you don't.
There's been like 1,700 times in this episode so far where I've been like, Lindsay, that'll preach. And that was 1,701 right there. I'm just like, no, these are marketing tools. Like, we own the billboard, and we don't have to. We
get to decide what goes up on it.
Yeah, like, we love our clients, but there's only certain things are going to go on there.
Absolutely.
That is amazing. One last question. I love kind of having these, like, we're like demystifying again, like the celebrity of things and also the beauty of things is I don't know if it was recent that you started the list, but you did start a new freebie based on Instagram.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of people nowadays, including myself, is like, oh, I'm way too late in the game for this. Like, what was your desire in starting that, and has it been doing well? Like, what are your future plans for the freebie and for the mailing list?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my mindset, this is like my marketing strategy for my business and for life. But back when I was in my internship at my church, we learned this thing called Story Brand by
Donald Miller.
Donald Miller. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And basically that is such a core foundational thing to marketing and what I do. And like, I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty, but spark notes of it is, as a business owner, we think that if you look at if you look at a story arc of life and you look at a movie story like arc or a novel story arc, there's like the starting plot, the resolution, like the conflict, the resolution, blah, blah, blah. There's always a hero of every story. They're always trying to get somewhere. They're always they want something, they need something, they want something at the end, but they cannot do it by themselves. I always use the example of like the Hunger Games. Katniss Everdeen wants to win the Hunger Games. So she's the hero of the story. She wants to win the Hunger Games. That's what she wants, but she cannot do that alone. She needs help. So whether you think of like Peeta as her helper or Haymitch as her helper, like they are there to assist her in winning the Hunger Games. And so they're the helper. And oftentimes as business owners, we look at our businesses and we think, oh, we're the hero. We're trying to sell. We're trying to book this many weddings. But that you have to switch that mindset completely. You as a business owner, you are the hero. Sorry, you are the helper to a hero. And your ideal client is the hero. They're trying to get from point A to point B. For us, photographers, it's usually a bride that wants to get married. That's not her ultimate goal in life, hopefully, but that's like, as far as we're concerned and how we can serve her, that's what her end game is. Sure. And so when you look at it as like, how can I, as a photographer and an educator, come alongside that person and give them the tools that they need? So for a photographer that's also wanting to educate and teach other photographers, for like me, I would count as like one of my ideal clients is a bride, but also another ideal client is another photographer that wants to learn, especially now that I'm doing workshops and things like that. So I strategically, in order to help a photographer get from point A to point B, how can I come alongside them and be the helper? I want to give them the tools that they need and the resources that can help them do that. And so that's why I started doing freebies, is I want to help people with the tools that they need and like help them get from point A to point B. And I feel like a lot of people on Instagram like are so lost. They don't know what to do, and they don't know like all the tips or they may know the tips and tricks, but like someone I think just needs to go out and say, it's like, hey, like this is the tools and this is what you need to do. This is how I did it. And I think it's so refreshing. And so that's why I created the freebie, and I definitely want more freebies to come along the way. I'm working on them right now, but I've loved it. I've had such a good response to it, and people I think are refreshed when there's just like free content out there that's helpful, encouraging, informative, and like actually helps people.
Totally. So yeah. I mean, I downloaded it and like, it was one, because I love your stuff and love your Instagram, and I'm one of those. I have an addictive personality, so like I will, and this gets me in trouble all the time, I'll just download everything or like find everything that people have, and like I have an education folder in my Dropbox, and all the folders are people. So there's a Lindsay Roman folder, and I have that freebie in there, and there's
love that
other educators, and like, oh, I want to like, what's Lindsay's vibe about Instagram? Let me go look at this real quick. But your freebie, it was so thorough, bro. Like you or sis, you could have charged like $9 for that at least, or obviously even more. And it's a really good freebie, because oftentimes it could just be like a list of 5 things. And you're like, okay, use hashtags, strategic hashtags to your place. Number 2, make sure that you're fun and friendly or whatever. And it's thorough. Like I need to go back and look at it again because I'm just
well, thank you.
This is so solid.
I basically wanted to make something that I wish I would have had like when I first started Instagram, because there's like all the rules and all the techniques, and like you feel lost in a sea of like oversaturation and feeling like you're not enough. And I don't know, I had a heart to help people like where I was when I was starting.
Totally. And I mean, everybody complains about the algorithm and all that stuff. And it's like, nah,
right.
Find the people. And people don't realize too, this is the last thing I'll say when we're just about like demystifying, is you don't need 21,000 clients. Like, no,
you don't. That's the thing. It's like you need 35 brides, like you said.
Yeah. It's just like, you just need a good crew. And even just thinking like my antagonistic brain is like, you know, we were talking about Yosemite back in the day, and I was just like, back in the day, so long ago,
so long.
like Yosemite, and I'm just like, but nobody's looking for that, and I'm like, no, like again, we only need 35 people to be like, no, this is what I'm looking for. Okay, cool.
Yes.
And it's people don't think about that, and they're just like, no, I need 1,000 likes. You couldn't run business if you had 1,000 clients a year. You could not. Like,
exactly. You would be overwhelmed.
No offense,
that's so true.
We turn into George Street, and we're just like, that would not be what we need. Where it's just like this massive thousands upon thousands of crew.
And that goes the same way for like teaching or putting content out. I think people stop themselves from putting out, like when I say like helping your ideal client get from point A to point B. Like they stop themselves from like putting out like a guide of like, oh, why you should elope or why a first look is good, because they see other photographers and they're like, well, they put it out. I don't need to say the same thing. But it's like, you are you, and you can say it in the way that you would. But then also people are following you that don't follow those people. Just because you're following like that photographer doesn't mean like a person that maybe wants to get married is looking up to you. You can still put out that content, because people, just because it's out there in the world doesn't mean that you have to stop yourself from like doing that. So don't be afraid. Yeah.
That'll Preach number 1702 by Lindsey Roman. That's awesome. Lindsey, thank you seriously for coming on. That was amazing. Where can people find you? Like, where can people sign up for the list? Where can people see all the crazy dance moves? Like,
oh my gosh. Yes. Well, my website is lindseyroman.com. That's just like if you want to inquire or like see what I'm about. But the party is really, truly over on Instagram at Mrs. Lindsey Roman. And that's where I dance. That's where you can find the link to the list. And you can basically find everything everything that is awesome is right there.
That's awesome. Is that the noise that I'm hearing right now? Is that your cat?
I don't know what noise you're hearing, honestly. I don't know. It might be a cat. We're at my, I think it might be my husband. I'm not quite sure.
We're leaving it in, guys. We're leaving it in. I hope your husband listens to this episode. Oh man, that's awesome. Lindsey, thanks so much for coming on.
I think he's doing that on purpose, because that's definitely not an animal sound. That's a human trying to imitate like an animal sound.
There you go. Everybody, there's Lindsey Roman for you.
Yeah.
That is the episode right there. One of the ones where I wasn't sure how long it was going to go, but we've been pushing some long episodes recently, well, other than the mini ones. And so Lindsey killed it. I absolutely love her. She's just, if you follow her on Instagram, her vibe and her soul, and she's amazing. And honestly, like, it's silly, but it feels like a celebrity in the way that you feel like encouraged, but she's awesome. Like, she's absolutely awesome. I would encourage you to follow her, check her out. Also get that Instagram freebie. Like, I loved her so much. I was just like, you can tell us everywhere to go, because she's amazing. Something to consider too, we still have a few slots left in the long-term mentorship program. Shoot me an email in the show notes, thebeardedhog@gmail.com, and we'll get you the information for that. One favor I would love, after listening to Lindsey's episode, I want to know what you thought. Go leave a review in iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts, and send it to me if you can, or screenshot it. Like, I want to know what you guys are thinking about that. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful day, guys. Keep being awesome.